What is up, PGF Nation? Last week, we covered 5 big NFL questions for 2026. This week, we're going to cover 5 big college football questions for 2026, including dark horse teams, which teams can make their first ever college football playoff, new coaching hires, and more. I'm Brad Fowler, rolling solo. My co-host Alex Higdon is off. But guys, let's crack a cold one. Let's kick this off. I've got a great show for you guys tonight. 5 big questions. And I'm going to start here with which new head coaching hire will have the biggest turnaround this season. Look, there's a couple teams, or I should say a couple coaches that jump out right away. For me, I think the first one is James Franklin. James Franklin obviously gets fired at Penn State, takes over at Virginia Tech. We know that the big knock on James Franklin was he couldn't get it done in the big games at Penn State. But don't let that deter you from realizing how good of a coach this guy actually is. Virginia Tech went 16-24 under Brent Pry. The undersold story here is that Brent Pry is actually staying on with Virginia Tech. He's going to take over as the defensive coordinator for James Franklin. Really interesting dynamic there, but I think it's going to be a good move because you're going to have some continuity here as he takes over, and he has already made some big-time moves, bringing over a bunch of talent from Penn State in the transfer portal, already building a really strong recruiting class at Virginia Tech. I think this is a team that has some serious momentum right now. The ACC feels wide open right now outside of Miami. I think James Franklin could quickly turn things around at Virginia Tech. This is a program that has been waiting forever for someone to keep the in-state talent home and build a modern buttoned-up structure around the whole thing. I think James Franklin is going to do that immediately at Virginia Tech because, look, that DMV area, that Virginia area, there is a lot of big-time high school talent coming out of the area. And Virginia Tech, back in the day, they used to put a fence around that area, and they used to get all the best recruits from there. That has not been the story for a long time. I think that will all change under James Franklin because, once again, we can say whatever we want about his record versus top 25 teams, his record versus the top teams of college football. I get that. But put that aside for a second and just look at the fact that this guy knows how to build programs. This guy knows how to win games. And I think that's what Virginia Tech is looking for, a guy that can build this program back to what it was, 25, 26 years ago, right? When they were competing at the highest level of this sport. So I think it's not going to be long before that ends up being a big impact hire in the ACC. Here's another name that I'm circling. Bob Chesney taking over at UCLA. He has put together one of the strongest early 2027 hauls, a legit top 10 class. I think that signals where this thing is headed for UCLA because he comes in and immediately starts making big changes, immediately starts bringing in talent. And even with that recruiting momentum, he's also brought in a roster through the portal that is the 11th ranked transfer class at UCLA. Look, this is a guy who's plugging holes already on this roster, and this makes the turnaround at UCLA feel very real. Look for Nico Amaliava to bounce back from a poor 2025 season. I think this could be one of the, maybe dark horse Heisman is a little strong, but this is a guy that I think is going to really surprise some people. We know how much talent this guy had coming out of high school. Big 5-star recruit, came out in that same class with Dante Moore and Arch Manning. He was one of those big quarterbacks that everybody was excited about. It kind of went off the rails at Tennessee. That's a whole side story. I'm sure you guys already know about that. Ends up at UCLA. Doesn't really work out there his first year. Now, this is a big opportunity for him with a coach with a proven track record of winning and building programs everywhere he's been. And I think everything I'm hearing out of UCLA is there is a buzz around this team right now. A few other names I want to mention. John Summerall at Florida, I think, was a great hire. I think Florida could be a sneaky good team this year, and John Summerall just might be the guy in Florida. Now, I know a lot of people are looking at it and saying, okay, you got another G5 coach. Is this Billy Napier 2.0? I don't know. Maybe it is, but we're going to find out quickly because I think John Summerall has actually a lot of talent on this roster at Florida to work with. So he's going into a situation where they could really hit the ground running here because Billy Napier, look, he didn't win a lot of games at Florida, and obviously that's why he was out. But he did bring in a lot of talent, and there's still a lot of talent on this roster. So that's an interesting name to watch as well. Oklahoma State is another team I'm circling here. Eric Morris former North Texas head coach. He is an elite offensive mind, a big-time play caller. He comes over to Stillwater, a team that had completely bottomed out. Mike Gundy had been there a long time. I think the message, the program, it had just kind of grown stale. You bring in a new energy and a new voice and a new leadership with Eric Morris. He's going to bring in a handful of key transfer portals with him as well, including Drew Mestemaker, one of the best quarterbacks in college football last season. I expect Oklahoma State to be a surprise team this year, and we're going to get to some of those here in a minute. But as far as new head coaches with the biggest turnarounds, those are some names that I am circling in college football. Big question number 2, which program is most likely to make its first college football playoff? Started thinking about this. There are some programs that have been knocking on the door, and there's 2 this year that I think really stand out to me. I'm going to start in the Big 12 with BYU. Quarterback Bear Bachmeier comes back after throwing for over 3,000 yards last year, 15 touchdowns, plus rushed for 11 more. So you've got an experienced quarterback who's coming back. LJ Martin was the Big 12 Offensive Player of the Year at running back with over 1,300 yards rushing and 12 touchdowns last season. This is going to be an explosive offense with experience at some of the most important positions. Look, BYU, I mentioned the Big 12. No disrespect to the Big 12, but they have an easier path in the Big 12 to get to the CFP. Now, the big problem, though, is that they don't have a lot of marquee games on the schedule. So they can't afford to drop very many games if they're going to get into this thing. I think 1 loss is about all they can afford. But their toughest games and a big, big non-conference game is Notre Dame at home. That is going to be a big-time opportunity for them to get one of those rare marquee wins on the resume. At home really could help them in that situation, of course. And Utah is going to be on the road. The Holy War, that's going to be big. And they don't play Texas Tech this year, which I think is really the most talented program in the Big 12 by far. So the schedule kind of lines up for them this year, where if they're a 1-loss team, they get to the Big 12 championship game. Even if they don't win it, if they have a strong showing, this is a team that could get into their first college football playoff. They were knocking on the door last year. I think they're going to be knocking on the door again this year. And if they get that win against Notre Dame, they probably don't even need to win the Big 12. If they get that win or they're runner-up in the Big 12, they probably get into the playoff. And like I said, they have a path that I think lines up for it. I love their coach. I like this program as far as the players they're bringing back. There's going to be a lot of talent on this team. They should be one of the best teams in that conference. Another team that could make its first college football playoff. How about the USC Trojans? If you're betting on raw roster talent alone, USC might just be the pick here. And look, Lincoln Riley has Jaden Maiava returning. This is one of the best, most dynamic dual-threat quarterbacks in the country. And he has offensive line continuity up front, which is huge. They're bringing back all 5 starters up front in the Big Ten. The line of scrimmage, we know that is a massive luxury for USC with this quarterback, with this play caller in Lincoln Riley. And look, it really hasn't been the offense that's been holding back USC in this Lincoln Riley era. The offense has been pretty good, pretty consistently good the whole time he's been there. The big problem has been the defense. They haven't been able to get stops. They have not been able to slow teams down. They're in too many shootouts, and they just are losing too many of those games because they can't get big stops. Really interesting hire this offseason because they bring in Gary Patterson. Yes, that Gary Patterson, former TCU head coach, college football Hall of Famer. He's coming back to college football to take over the DC position at USC. I think that could be a home run hire. And he might just be the guy with the experience and the X's and O's coaching ability, especially on that side of the ball, to possibly elevate USC's defense to be good. They don't have to be great. I think this offense is going to be high-powered enough that if that defense is, let's say, top 5 in the Big Ten, they're a lock to make the college football playoff at that point. I think they will just be too much for most of these teams to handle if that's the case. If it doesn't come together, I think Lincoln Riley's seat could be scorching hot at the end of the year. This really feels like a make or break year for Lincoln Riley. This is kind of a side note here. I know I'm kind of going on a tangent here, but just hear me out. Lincoln Riley, I think, might be one coach in college football that's under as much pressure as anybody. I think USC is running out of patience here. He's going into year 6 at USC, and they have not reached the playoff yet. So I think USC fans had much bigger expectations when they brought in Lincoln Riley, and it just has not come to fruition for them. They've had some good years, but they just haven't broke through. They have not been a legit threat in that conference. And I think also their fan base, I think, is really getting tired of the fact that, forget being a contender in the Big Ten, they're not even the best team on the West Coast. Oregon has taken that crown and really run with it. They haven't beaten Oregon in a long time, and they have a big game against them this year. They do have a tough schedule. This is kind of the big hang-up for USC because of the schedule in the Big Ten. Like I said, they're going to play Oregon. Now, that game is at home, which is big, but we know that has been a matchup that has really favored the Ducks. They also play Washington, who I think is going to be very competitive this year. They are at Penn State, always a tough place to play. I think Penn State's still going to be very good this year and maybe surprise some people. They also play Ohio State and at Indiana. Yikes. So if it doesn't go well for USC, if they do not break through and make their first CFP, watch out. Lincoln Riley might just find his way out the door at USC. A couple other teams that I want to mention here. Not going to go in depth on these, but here's some teams that I thought about mentioning that could make their first ever CFP. Utah. Utah is really interesting. Kyle Whittingham, after being there for what feels like forever, takes the job at Michigan. I still think they're in a good position to be competitive in the Big 12. If they can make a run in that conference, maybe they get in. Louisville, absolutely a team to circle in the ACC. I think Houston, also in the Big 12, is a team that could be very good this year. I'll talk more about them in a little bit. Louisville as well. Arizona, I think, is a sneaky team to watch this year. Noah Fifita is probably one of the best quarterbacks you've never heard of. This guy can really sling it, man. He's a dynamic quarterback. Arizona is a team that could surprise people this year and maybe knock that door down. Now, I mentioned those teams, and a couple of them we're going to talk about here because quick shout out to our friends at props.cash, the best player prop research tool in the game. Props.cash lets you scan thousands of props across sports books to quickly spot the highest value opportunities. You get real-time injury and lineup intel, advanced filters to find exactly what you're looking for, and even correlated player props so you can see what tends to hit when a player goes over their line. They cover NFL, NBA, MLB, NHL, college football, college basketball, and the WNBA. It's legit next level prep. If you're serious about betting smarter, go to props.cash and use code PGF25 for 25% off your first month. That's code PGF25 for 25% off your first month at props.cash. The official ticketing app of Pint Glass Football is now SeatGeek. I can't recommend them enough, guys. I've been using SeatGeek for years. You want to go to a game this season? SeatGeek is here to take the confusion out of buying tickets, making sure you get the best seats at the best prices. With SeatGeek, you'll never have to worry about overpaying for tickets again. How? They put a 0 to 10 score on each ticket, so you know you're getting a good deal. But here's the real game changer. You can get $20 off your first ticket purchase with the code PGFPOD. That's right, $20 off with code PGFPOD. This season, make every game day epic with SeatGeek. Download the SeatGeek app and remember to enter the code PGFPOD to grab your $20 discount. Question number 3. Who are the dark horse teams in the Power 4 conferences? So, Big Ten won the national championship. We're going to start with them. In the Big Ten, I mentioned UCLA and Bob Chesney. I think UCLA, now look, dark horse doesn't necessarily mean they're going to compete for the conference. I don't think they will, just to be very clear here. I think they could really surprise people here. I'm a big believer in Bob Chesney and what he's doing at UCLA. I think there's some real momentum here, and they could be a lot better than people realize. Maybe not a CFP, maybe not winning the Big Ten, but maybe a team that's playing in a much better bowl game than anybody expected to go into the year. In the SEC, My dark horse team to watch here is the Florida Gators. Yes, the Florida Gators. I mentioned John Summerall taking over at Florida. New coach, but a lot of talent on this roster at Texas, and Georgia is at home. Those are kind of the big landmines on the schedule. But look, this is a pretty favorable schedule for Florida. They went 4-8 last year. Things kind of went off the rails for them. I'm expecting them to be a lot better than people expect. This is a team that at the end of the year, I think could actually be in the mix in the SEC and really surprise some people. So they're my dark horse SEC team. Look, by the way, my dark horse SEC team last year was Texas A&M. Nailed that one, guys. Taking a victory lap on that one. In the Big 12, I mentioned this team briefly. My dark horse team is going to be Houston. I think this is a program that is ready to break through. 9 Houston Cougars are on the Phil Steele All Big 12 preseason honors. 9. This team has some talent, man. Houston also landed one of the top transfer portal classes of 2026. There has been an infusion of talent in Houston. I think this is a team that's on the brink of contending in the Big 12. So watch out for Houston. I think they're getting slept on here. They could be a dark horse in the Big 12. I mentioned this team a second ago as well. Louisville. Louisville brings in a top 5 portal class, according to On3, and a number 13 portal class, according to 247 Sports. That's big time, man. Louisville is bringing in a big time transfer portal class. They brought in several 4-star transfers. They added some real top-end talent. Pair that with the kind of roster continuity and coaching stability that we've seen from this program and this conference that, once again, is completely wide open outside of Miami, which, look, I think Miami is going to be a problem, but outside of them, there's not a lot of teams that you can look at in the ACC and you really have to circle. I think Louisville could win just about every game on their schedule, and it's a pretty manageable schedule. They play 5 of the bottom 7 teams from the ACC last season. So they hit the schedule lottery in a conference that hasn't been great. This is a team that I think can make some real noise. They're a team that not only can make some noise, they're a team that I think might shock some people and maybe even make their first CFP this year as well. Question number 4. Which team will be this year's LSU, Clemson, or Penn State? A team with preseason national championship hype that falls way short of expectations. There's one team that really jumped out to me. That is the Oregon Ducks. Now, look, they should be ranked top 5 on every preseason top 25 list. And on a lot of these top 25s that are coming out and that are going to come out, they're probably even going to be top 3, top 2. And don't be shocked if they're number 1 on some of these top 25 lists. That's how talented this Ducks team is. They bring back a ton of talent. They had a bunch of guys that decided to forego the NFL draft this season that would have been first and second round type picks to come back to Eugene for another year at Oregon. This roster is loaded. This is probably one of the top 3 or 4 best rosters in college football. But I picked Oregon because they have to replace the offensive and defensive coordinators. That could be a heavy lift for a team. That's a lot to replace in one season. Tosh Lupoy took the head coaching job at Cal, and Will Stein took the head coaching job at Kentucky. Those guys were rock stars. They had a top 10 defense and a top 10 offense last year for a team that was really just one game away from playing for a national title. They also have a tough schedule. This is a really tough schedule for Oregon. They open with Boise State. Now, look, they should be a heavy favorite. It's Boise State. I get it. But look, let's be fair here. You're going to open with Boise State. That's a very competitive top-tier group of 5 team. You know, if you had to give Dan Lanning some truth serum and ask him, do you really want to open your season against a team like Boise State? He'd probably say he'd rather have more of a cupcake to open the year with to kind of get the guys ready, so to speak. That's a really tough G5 team to come in and play on week 1. On the road week 2, they play Oklahoma State, who I just mentioned should be a much improved team this year. With new head coach Eric Morris from North Texas, he brings over a bunch of talent from North Texas, a bunch of transfers from North Texas, including one of the best quarterbacks in college football last season, Drew Mestemaker, a guy that a lot of people are circling as a potential first-round quarterback in the NFL draft in April. I mean, this guy can spin it, man. That's a rough way to open the season week 1 and week 2. Like, on paper, those games don't look scary. I get it. But once you peel back the curtain a little bit, those are pretty tough games to open the year with, especially with 2 rookie coaches calling your offense and defense. Now, they also play UCLA, who I mentioned, who's going to be improved this year as well. At USC, who I mentioned, that's going to be a huge game. At Ohio State, they also play Michigan, and they end the year with rival Washington. Always a tough game, and I think Washington's going to be good. There's also some sneaky landmines on the schedule as well. Northwestern, I think, is going to be a really quietly improved team this year. And at Michigan State, I think both those teams should be better with new coaches and a lot of transfers that they're bringing in. They have some real landmines on this schedule, and they're going to face a ton of high-level quarterbacks when you go up and down the schedule. So if there was a team that I think could be the LSU, Clemson, Penn State of this season that's getting a ton of preseason hype that might just end up falling way short, it'd be the Oregon Ducks. Question number 5. Which teams from last year's college football playoff won't make it back this year? So let's go over the teams real quick in case you forgot, not including the G5 teams. No disrespect, but who cares? So here are the Power 4 teams that made the college football playoff last year. Indiana, Oregon, Ohio State, Alabama, Oklahoma, Georgia, Ole Miss, Texas A&M, Texas Tech, and Miami. I've got a couple teams that jumped out right away. And sorry, guys, if you're down south, cover your ears here because I'm not trying to pick on the SEC, but there's 2 teams from the SEC that I don't think are going to make it back to the playoff this year. Let's start with Texas A&M. Look, I love Mike Elko and what he is building there. I believe in this coach. I believe in this program. If I was buying stock in a program over the next 5 years, Texas A&M would be one of the first teams I'd look to buy stock in. So this isn't a shot at them. It's not a shot at their coach, their program, but they coasted last year on a really easy schedule, and they got exposed late in the year when they faced Texas and Miami, and it really showed that their record wasn't as good as they actually were. They were not ready to play against the elite teams in college football. Their 2026 schedule is not going to be nearly as easy as their 25 schedule. They have Arizona State in the non-conference. That's a week 2 game. That's a sneaky tough game. Then on the road at LSU, at Alabama, at Oklahoma, and of course they play Texas in the Red River Shootout, and they've got Tennessee at home. This is a brutal schedule for Texas A&M. So I think this is a team that could take a step back this year, even though they're talented, even though I love the coach. I don't think they get back to the playoff this year. The other team in the SEC that I don't think is going to get back to the playoff this year, cover your ears, Alabama Crimson Tide. Yeah, that's right. Roll Tide, no Tide. Not this year. I think this program is moving in the wrong direction, guys. I think the shine from the Nick Saban era is slowly fading away here at Alabama, and they have a tough schedule as well. Look, Alabama faces a brutal 5-week stretch that is going to make or break their season, period. They've got games against Georgia, at Tennessee, Texas A&M, and at LSU. Alabama also hosts Florida State, who beat them last year. Now, look, I don't think Florida State's going to be any good this year, but we didn't think they would beat them last year. So that's kind of a sneaky game to circle as well. I think there's real roster concerns with Alabama. Alabama lost its starting quarterback, their top rusher, multiple key pass catchers. The majority of their starting offensive line all gone. Now you've got big questions because you've got a first-year starter at quarterback. Whoever ends up winning that battle, my guess is going to be redshirt freshman Keelan Russell, who, look, was a 5-star recruit, got a lot of talent, but that's still a lot of inexperience and youth at the most important position. Big question marks about the running game. Can they get it on track here? Because Alabama could not run the ball last year, and that is a serious issue. I don't know if that's going to be any better this year, especially with the new offensive line they have to break in and with new running backs. Big question marks about the defense. I just think there's too many questions and not enough answers when I look at Alabama, and I think this schedule, the combination of the roster turnover, and the fact that they just have not been able to bring in the elite talent that they used to. This is a step back year for Alabama, and I think they missed the college football playoff. And Kalen DeBoer's seat probably starts to heat up here, because I don't know how patient Alabama fans are going to be with all the success they've had in recent years, playing for national championships, winning national championships. The SEC title game at the very least feels like a birthright if you're an Alabama fan. I don't think any of those things are going to happen this year. I think they take a big step back, and there's real question marks about this team going forward. Look, guys, do us a favor. Hit that subscribe or follow button right now so you don't miss any future episodes. Once again, I'm Brad Fowler. My co-host, Alex Higdon, should be back next week. This is Pint Glass Football. Hope you enjoyed it, PGF Nation, and we'll catch you next time.